For context, I'm a female. I had just moved out of my parents' house after my graduation from college, and was looking forward to hosting some of my good friends at my new place. This day, I had just returned from work when my phone suddenly rang, shattering the silence of my empty house. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Hesitating, I answered. A voice crackled on the other end, distorted by static.
"Why did you leave the window open?"
It asked. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced towards the living room. The curtains were moving slightly. The window was open, but I hadn't opened it. I remember locking it on my way to work. As a rule, I always ensure I lock all my doors and windows before going out. My hands started to tremble. I stammered something into the phone, but the line went dead. I quickly called the police, trying to explain that someone might be in my house. As I spoke, the line cut off again. The phone rang immediately, the same unknown number. I answered, my voice shaking. The static-filled voice came through again, more clearly this time.
"I can see you,"
it said. My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone and ran to the front door. As I reached for the handle, it clicked, locking from the outside. I banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at my throat. Then, I heard it, a faint, almost inaudible laughter, coming from the hallway. It grew louder, surrounding me, echoing through the house. I looked around wildly, but there was no one there. Suddenly, I realized the voice hadn't been coming from the phone at all. It was inside the house. And it was getting closer. That was when I remembered my open window. I ran and jumped towards it, hurting myself in the process. I even tore my work skirt as I threw my leg over the sill. When I got out, I ran to a store that was close to my house. I used their phone to call the police. They came 10 minutes later. I was standing outside with some of my neighbors when the police walked out of my apartment with a crazy-looking man in dirty clothes. They took him to the station and quizzed him seriously, but he refused to say how he got into my apartment and how he got my number. I was told that he would be committed into a mental facility. But I know he won't be there forever. I don't know who he was and what he would have done to me if I had not ran out of my house. One day he would be released and I won't wait for that day. I'm planning to move back in with my parents or search for another apartment in a better location.
This story happened 5 years ago when I was 14 years old. My family lived in a suburb and most times our estate would be quiet, giving the place a graveyard feel. I was a shy boy then and the quiet environment suited me perfectly. I would get lost in books, movies, and video games. I didn't have much friends then and the few I had were from my school. That particular day was a holiday. We had just closed for the term and I was so relieved and happy to be home. When my mom called from downstairs that she was going out with my little brother and asked if I was interested to tag along, I quickly turned her down. I wanted the house to myself for a change. She was in a hurry and reluctantly left without me, stating that she would return very soon. When I saw her car back out of our driveway, I had a little regret because everywhere was really quiet except for the sound of crickets. I shrugged off any fear I felt coming and curled up with a book in my room. Some minutes later, I heard it, a faint whisper. I paused, looking up, but the house was silent. I shook it off and went back to reading. But moments later, there it was again, louder this time. It was coming from the walls. I put my book down and pressed my ear against the wall, straining to listen. I could hear it clearly now, my name, whispered over and over. My skin crawled. I backed away, trying to calm my racing heart. I had never experienced anything like that before. It was strange to hear my name being called in a whisper that way. Suddenly, there was a loud thud behind the wall, like something heavy falling. Then more whispers, too many to count, overlapping, filling the room. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but as I dialed, the whispers stopped. The silence was so sudden it made my ears ring. I took a step back, and that's when I heard a voice, clear and cold, coming from right behind me. "We know you're listening," it said. I spun around, but the room was empty. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I bolted from the room, slamming the door behind me. As I ran down the hallway, the whispers followed, growing louder, chasing me through the house. I reached the front door and yanked it open, the whispers turning into a chorus of laughter as I fled into the hot sunshine. My parents didn't believe me when they got home and saw me sitting outside our house. They said I was making it all up. Since that day anyway, I refused to sleep in my room. I made so much fuss that they had to change my room. I am 19 years old now and can't wait to go on up to college. It was a stormy night, and I was home alone. The rain battered the windows, and the wind howled like a wild animal outside. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the house into complete darkness. I grabbed my phone, using its light to navigate my way to the kitchen. I needed candles. As I bent down to open the cupboard, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate steps, pacing back and forth. I froze. My heart began to race. No one was supposed to be home. The footsteps stopped, and I heard a door creak open. My pulse quickened as I took a cautious step back, eyes glued to the ceiling as if I could see through it. There was a long silence, broken only by the muffled sound of my own breathing. Then, a shadow appeared under the door at the top of the stairs. Someone was standing there, just out of sight. I held my breath, hoping it was a trick of the darkness, maybe a tree branch casting a shadow. But then the shadow shifted, and a low, raspy whisper drifted down the stairs. "I know you're there." I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. The whisper repeated, louder this time. I bolted for the front door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. As I yanked the door open, I dared one last look back. The shadow had moved down the stairs, and I saw the glint of eyes peering at me from the darkness. I didn't wait to see more. I ran out into the storm, the whisper still echoing in my ears. I ran to my neighbor's house, banging their door until someone opened it. I was breathless as I said, "Call the police. There's an intruder in my house." When the police car drove into my driveway, I went to meet them. They told me to stay put while they go in and search my apartment. After about 15 minutes, they came out empty. They didn't see anyone. They advised I lock all my doors and windows henceforth. That was a day I would never forget. I have not seen anything like that since then.
When I was in college, I was living in a little flat with two of my roommates. That night, they had gone out to attend a party and I was left home alone to prepare for a test I had the next morning. After studying for 3 hours straight, I started preparing to turn in for the night. I was brushing my teeth before bed when the bathroom light flickered. I frowned, looking up at the ceiling. For a second, I thought I saw something move behind me from the corner of my eye. I turned around quickly, but the bathroom was empty. Shaking my head, I turned back to the mirror. That was when I saw it. The reflection wasn't mine. It was a woman with hollow eyes and a twisted, cruel smile. I gasped, dropping my toothbrush. I took a step back, but the reflection didn't move. She stared at me, her eyes dark and empty. My heart pounded in my chest. I reached out, trembling, to touch the mirror, but as my fingers brushed the glass, the woman moved. She leaned closer, her lips parting as if to speak. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her hand pressed against the other side of the glass, and she whispered,
"Shush, you don't want to wake the others."
I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the bath mat, falling to the floor. The mirror shattered above me, but when I looked up, the woman was gone. I scrambled to my feet and ran from the bathroom, but as I passed by the hallway mirror, I saw her again, watching me from the corner of my eye. Every mirror in the house showed her, no matter where I looked, her eyes following me as I fled from room to room. I quickly threw my clothes on and ran out of the house. I ran all the way to the venue of the party where my roommates were. They were surprised and happy to see me. I dragged them to a corner where the noise of the music wouldn't disturb us and told them everything I saw. They exchanged glances and one of them started talking. She said they didn't want to spook me, that was why they kept silent about the flat. She said that the last lady that stayed at that apartment ended her life. Both of them had seen her ghost too. I listened with my mouth wide open. I couldn't return home alone and had to stay with them at the party. The next day after my test, I moved my things out of that flat. My roommates were sorry to see me go because now they would have to pay much more money for the rent. They quickly started searching for a replacement. For my part, I was not sorry to leave. That was the worst paranormal experience of my life and I don't wish it for anybody.
It was late, and I was home alone, trying to relax with a movie. The house was eerily quiet, every creak of the floorboards amplified in the silence. I paused the film to grab a snack from the kitchen, and as I passed by the window, something caught my eye. I stopped, turning to look. There, pressed against the glass, was a face, pale, with wide, unblinking eyes and a smile that stretched too far. My heart nearly stopped. I stumbled backward, blinking, and the face disappeared. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. Was it my imagination? A trick of the light? I edged closer to the window, peering into the darkness outside. Nothing. Just the quiet, empty street. I let out a shaky breath, convincing myself I was seeing things. I turned back to the living room, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. I sat down, trying to focus on the movie again. But then I saw it. Reflected in the TV screen behind me was the face. It was closer now, clearer, staring at me with that same wide-eyed grin. I spun around, but the room was empty. The reflection was gone. I grabbed the remote, my hands trembling, and turned off the TV. The room plunged into darkness, and that's when I heard it. A faint tap on the window, followed by the soft sound of laughter. I quickly pulled all my curtains shut and ran upstairs. I locked myself in my room and waited in the dark, listening for footsteps. I didn't hear anything. My heartbeat was loud enough to deafen me. I waited and waited, yet nothing. Was that a random person? Or was I being stalked? I so badly wanted to call the police, but I was sure they would say as long as the stranger didn't break into my house, I would be fine. I didn't know how long I sat in front of my door, but when I woke up, it was morning. I got up and walked cautiously downstairs. I opened my front door and walked outside, checking that everything was okay. I also spoke with some of my neighbors and they said they didn't see any suspicious person outside last night. I don't know who that person was, but I was thankful that they didn't break in and I was safe. I was sitting in the living room browsing through my phone when I heard a faint knocking sound coming from the guest bedroom. It was odd because that room had been locked since I moved in, and I'd never bothered to open it. Tonight, though, the knocking was persistent, growing louder, echoing through the house. I grabbed the old key from the drawer, curiosity getting the better of me. As I approached the door, the knocking stopped. I hesitated, key in hand, but then slid it into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a room coated in dust, empty except for a single chair in the middle. The air was thick and cold. I stepped inside, heart pounding, scanning the corners. There was nothing unusual, nothing that could have made the sound. I turned to leave, but as I reached for the door, it slammed shut behind me. I grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Then the knocking started again, this time from the outside. It was frantic, as if someone was pounding on the door. I pressed my ear to the wood, listening. A voice, muffled but urgent, pleaded, "Let me in." I stumbled back, my mind racing. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, until it was deafening. I backed into the center of the room, my hands over my ears, but the sound was inside my head. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. The door swung open on its own, and the hallway stretched out before me, dark, empty, and cold. I took a step towards it, but then I heard the same voice behind me whisper, "Stay." I debated in my mind whether to leave or stay. I was thinking, why would the voice tell me to stay? Is there something sinister lurking in my hallway? Is it trying to save me? But why should I even listen to a disembodied voice? Was I going crazy? I searched for the light switch, found it and turned it on. The room was empty but for the lone chair. I quietly walked into the hallway and shut and locked the door. As I walked down the hallway, I turned all the lights on. I was feeling so cold, I could see my breath in front of my face. I didn't see anything suspicious, neither did I hear the voice again. I wasn't even sure if I was losing my mind. Who would believe me? I have never believed in the paranormal, but this experience made me question everything I believed in. I checked the time, it was some minutes past 2 a.m. I picked up my car keys and drove out into the night, having no idea where I was going. I just wanted out of that house. I called my good friend as I drove and he invited me over. By dawn, I resumed at my office but left work early so as to move some of my stuff to my friend's place where I would be camping until I'm able to figure out what my future plans would be.